I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the NFP Review Board for Tuesday, June 24th, 2025. Nolan, will you please call the roll?
Hollander?
Here.
Rowe?
Here.
Martin?
Here.
Bassett?
Here.
Murgia is on their way, and board members Frederickson and Stemple are absent today.
All right. Can I get a motion to excuse absent members?
So moved. Support.
All right, all in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Nope, motion carries. Item B, adoption of the agenda.
Quick note, I did print an old agenda by accident today, so it's not the agenda for today, but the correct agenda is available online, so.
All right, thank you for that. Can I get a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved. Support.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Nope, motion carries. Item C, the approval of the minutes. Are there any amendments or comments related to the draft meeting minutes from the May 27th, 2025 NFP meeting? All right, I'm hearing none. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes from the May 27th, 2025 NFP meeting as presented?
So moved. Support.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Item D, public comments. If there are any comments from the public, please come forward, state your name, and you'll have 3 minutes to address the board. All right, I see nobody stepping forward in person. Do we have any calling comments? No calling comments. Board member comments. Are there any comments from the board? All right. Hearing none. I suppose should we kind of delay it for a minute to get started on new business?
Well, I can go through the staff report, and
Okay.
the applicant can then start their presentation, so
Okay.
we don't delay things further, so, yeah.
So at this point, I'm going to recuse myself.
Yeah, so state that you're recusing yourself and the reason why, and then
Yep.
you can stay there, or you can move away from the...
Okay,
From yourself.
I'm recusing myself because today I am the primary applicant.
Spooky. All right, Nolan, can you provide some background on this new business item?
Yeah, so potentially for Director Martin, this may be a project they remember. For the rest of the board, this is going to be a newer project. So this is been to NFP a few times since 2022. It's located at, the new address is 1900 Belford Street, formerly 333 East Elcott Street. And it's zoned residential multi-dwelling. It's a Kalamazoo brownfield site, and it's located right between Alcott Street and Reed Street. So it's the complex of properties that the city owns that have basically been brownfield for a long, long time. So what they're proposing for this redevelopment site is housing project with 48 housing units across 3 buildings. You'll see I printed 2 plan sets that are available for board members to take a look at a larger view. We'll also have it up on the screen. So there's actually been work involved on multiple fronts with the city for this project, not only NFP, but our development process and our Brownfield Redevelopment Authority, with splitting the parcel area off from the main Brownfield site via a purchase agreement. And I mentioned it came before NFP in 2022. It was originally going to be, there was some consideration for a potential variance request from the woodland standard. The NFP board at that time, at that meeting, determined that the woodland on site within that developable area didn't qualify as woodland. And so that's what they came before NFP in 2022 for, and then they were looking for, at the time, conditional site plan approval in 2023, and came back before the NFP board, and I'll let the applicant discuss some of that background. Essentially, this is just a complex project that's been through our development process now for a couple years due to some funding complexities and just the overall some changes to the site layout, as well as just being on a brownfield property. There are other steps to go through. But again, this is a multifamily housing type project. The overall project scope hasn't changed much since that 2023 meeting. There's been some slight changes, but none of which staff feel have affected NFP or affected natural features on the property. So, and this is primarily in NFP due to its proximity to the creek. There are some protected trees on site, some vegetative buffer areas along the creek. But primarily, it's a stormwater / slope and water resource heavy area. So those are the primary concerns. It's also, it also needed a rare species review. They had that completed in 2022, and that report is included as a printout in your documents there. So, after staff reviewing the plan sets as they stand, we're recommending that it qualifies for, essentially, it's a full approval, but with the condition that if the stormwater engineer approves their stormwater plans, they're good to go. So that's what's up for consideration today, and I'll invite the applicant to speak to the project. Just let me know when you'd like to advance, and I'll do so. Try that.
So I'm Matt Hollander. I'm a senior developer with Edison Community Partners, also a resident of Kalamazoo, and recusing myself today from my seat on the board. Joining me today, I have Paul Warnick, Megan Homan, and Hayward Babineau from Abbenmarsh, who I'll call up if there's anything that comes up during the presentation that I can't answer. Next slide. So the property that we're discussing today is bounded by, so the orientation here is sideways, so north is to your right, and the Portage Creek on the west is the west boundary of the site, Reed Avenue to the north, Belford to the east, and then Bryant Street to the south as it jogs around. I think there's 4 single-family homes there in that clump of trees on the bottom left. Next slide. You can see how the site plan that we'll look at orients on the site. So we'll have an access drive off of Bryant to the south, and then an access drive that goes onto Belford at the intersection of Belford and Lay Street. Next slide. The site plan itself You're looking at the Portage Creek to the west on the top of the screen here, and the property between the paved path, which is shown sort of bisecting this image, and the creek is a restrictive covenant area. So there's a restrictive covenant in place. We will not be performing any work in that area. Unless Eagle requires that we do work in that area, in which case we'll probably have to come back here, and we're hoping to not have to do that. But that is the primary slope area on the site, and it's also the water feature with the Portage Creek there. So there is a setback noted here from the beginning of the slope down to the creek. And again, we don't plan to do any work, no utility work. Nothing is going to happen in that area unless the state forces us to do otherwise. What you'll see on this image below the pathway is Building A, which is the large building. That's a 36-unit building with 34 one-bedroom apartments. That's permanent supportive housing for individuals recovering from substance use disorders. This will be the first new construction supportive housing project in Kalamazoo in quite some time. Buildings B and C towards the bottom of the image are 6-unit buildings. Those have 2- and 3-bedroom units for families with heads of household in recovery. And the other 2 units in the big building are for a resident manager and a recovery coach who will live on site. We have some amenities on the site, including a small playground area adjacent to each of the family buildings. We have a small dog park area planned just to the south of the Building A, the large building, a walking path in the north end of the site, and some stormwater retention infrastructure scattered throughout the site. The main change from the last time you saw this is just the layout of the parking. The buildings are essentially in the same location. We have not made any changes that would impact the natural features that NFP is concerned with since the last time we stood before the board, but the site plan has changed enough that we're here again. Next slide. So you can see from the grading plan, there's some topo lines on there that'll show you where the slope areas are. Again, there's a large format set for you to look at if the printed version you have in your hand is too small. And once again, we're not going to be doing any work in those areas. You can see some shaded areas on this image where we have known buried foundations. This was originally the Performance Paper Mill site, which was actually listed on the Federal Superfund Register. There was a significant amount of cleanup on the site to close it out from Superfund. It's still a brownfield. It's still a facility. The primary environmental concerns on the site now are soil and water contamination. And so we're working with Eagle to design controls, exposure controls for exposure to soil contaminants and water contaminants. We'll be on city water, so there's no pathway there. And we're working through our due care response plan right now, and the Eagle approval is a requirement of final site plan approval. So in terms of the environmental aspects, exposure aspects of the site, that's all being handled through Eagle right now. Next slide. Just so you know sort of the history of the site, these are some images of kind of before and after the big cleanup, the initial cleanup of the paper mill. You can see the image on the left, former industrial site, and on the right, that's post remediation of the Portage Creek. There are native plantings along the banks of the creek, and you can see sort of the slope areas that we're talking about. There's a pretty significant drop from our site down to the creek, but our site is relatively flat until it drops off. Next slide. This is another image taken, this is a Google Street View image from Reed, and that gives you another sort of viewpoint of the site. That's the walking path on the left, which is currently crushed gravel path. We do intend to pave that as part of the project, and that'll be one of the north-south connections of the KRVT trail, heading south into the Portage Bicentennial Trail. And so everything to the left of the trail in this picture we will impact, and everything to the right we intend to leave alone. Next slide. Soil erosion plan. So just to get ahead of that, we do intend to implement soil erosion sedimentation controls. We'll have silt fencing at the top of the slope area. We will have also tree protection for the special interest trees on the property that were identified during our tree survey. And if there's any more detailed questions about that, I'll kick that back to Abin Marsh. Next slide. So here, utility plan, the only reason I stuck this in here was to show you that we're not putting any utilities in that restrictive covenant area in the slope down to the creek. There are existing, water, gas, sewer, electric utilities to the site, and so we're not putting in significant amounts of new infrastructure. Next slide. Just to give you, some context of some of the different things that we've come before you to talk about, we did do a tree survey on the project because initially it was difficult for us to determine if we had a woodlot on the property or not, and so we hired arborist services to conduct a tree survey. This is all of the trees that were surveyed. There's also a list in your packet of the species of trees and the condition of those trees and the sizes. If you go to the next slide, these are all of the trees that would be prohibited under NFP. Our primary concern was the stand in the middle of the property, which is mostly composed of a colony of black locust trees, which I think everybody would like to see go away. Next slide. These are the special status trees according to the NFP overlay, and if you go to the next slide, the landscape plan, you'll see a table in the top right on this slide. You have this table in the drawings that are sitting in front of you. That is a schedule of the special interest trees, and what it'll show you is that the 3 special interest trees that we intend to remove are all silver maples in poor condition, and we'll be replacing those with trees that are approved under NFP. So the specific species are in the set of documents in front of you, but this is just kind of a general overview of how we're treating the special trees, and we'll be adding additional trees throughout the site. Next slide. Sorry, actually, go back one. We did catch, as we were preparing for the meeting, there are 4 examples of non-native plantings in the landscape plan. I think we're looking for some direction on what we can substitute those with, and we're completely open to substituting those plantings with things that this board would approve. But given that there's not a master list for people doing development projects of what's allowed and what's not allowed, it was a little tough for us to figure out what to put in there. So that's something that we would like some guidance on. Next slide. This is just a rendering of the project. This is information only. It's not really related to NFP, but this will be an all-electric project certified to the Passive House Green Building Standard, as well as Enterprise Green Communities, Energy Star, and Zero Energy Ready Homes. It'll have a significant solar component. This will be one of the 2 most efficient multifamily buildings probably in the state of Michigan, and the other archetypal kind of, or the prototype for this project is under construction right now in the North Side neighborhood. It's a project called the Legacy Senior Living. We designed the Building A, the large building, using the same plans that we developed for that project, which is also going to be Passive House certified. So there is a possibility that we'll hit close to net zero energy on this project, which is not a natural feature, but I know that that may be interesting to some of you. Next slide is just another rendering of one of the smaller buildings. Simple, straightforward buildings, but they're not institutional. We designed them with the neighborhood in mind, so these small buildings, when you look at them off of Belford Street, they'll actually look a lot like a 2-story single-family home. That was intentional because we want to create a gradual increase in density from the single-family homes in the neighborhood to the east into what has become an interdisciplinary health campus with family health center, federally qualified health center. There's an MDHHS office building next door. The health department building is right across the creek, and there are other services that will be valuable to the population that we're serving with this project. So that's all I have to say today. What questions do you have?
I did also want to jump back real quick to the special interest tree schedule. So a reminder for protected trees, there are sizes and DBH and species listed in the NFP ordinance. And then there's also, beyond that, any tree that's larger than, I think, 24-inch DBH is considered protected. So that's why you're seeing some of these large silver maples on that list, is because they're just exceptionally large. So I just wanted to clarify that if anyone's confused why the silver maples are on there.
What are they going to be replaced with? Do we know?
Paul, you want to take that one?
I'm Paul Warnick, landscape architect with App and Marsh. If you can kind of scroll to the right and kind of zoom in.
Oh, this is I can't scroll on the plans.
Well, they are identified on that sheet, and
Give me 1 second here.
I'll see if I can look at my small copy here and tell you. Which would be along Reed Street, I believe, and I don't have my reading list with me, I apologize for that. But I believe we have a hackberry, 3 hackberries along Reed Street. Yep.
Sounds fine to me. Okay. Makes sense there. I was looking for in the landscape plan too, you mentioned there was some non-native species or something along those lines that you wanted.
Yeah, so Owen
guidance.
just brought it up on the screen here. The plant schedule sheet is on sheet L1.1.
Which page is it in the agenda packet?
Look for page 48.
48, cool, thanks.
And it's in the upper right of the sheet L1.1.
There we go.
L1.1 should also be printed
Oh, I see it now.
in large scale format. There's 2 copies of that.
Fantastic.
I tried to keep the agenda packet smaller for folks, but
So you're talking about Summer Sweet, at least, and Birch Leaf Spirea.
Yeah, the spirea was one of them.
Yeah, there's one native and one non-native one. So.
Yeah, the summer sweet caught my attention when I was skimming through. I didn't think that one was native, and I was kind of thinking about alternatives, and I had noticed some of the spirea, and one that came to mind was steeplebush or Spirea tomentosa. It's kind of another showy flowery shrub that kind of similar aesthetic to that species.
Taking notes, okay.
Yeah. And that one I know I've seen on nursery lists and stuff, so I think it is available from nurseries. But yeah, that was initially the first glance, the only one that caught my eye, but it's good to know that there's a few others. But yeah, if we can kind of further identify the other ones of concern, we can kind of put forth some suggestions.
Yeah, it's the clef, the summer sweet, the birch leaf spirea, and the inkberry look to be the non-native ones on here.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, if the other plants on the list are acceptable, we can just increase the number of lead plant or New Jersey tea.
Sure.
Or the St. John's wort and replace those.
Yeah, that's a simple solution for sure.
Yep, happy with that too.
And we've talked about it too. The board has the ability to, as long as it's non-invasive.
Yeah.
There are certain ornamentals or non-natives that you can approve as a board. That's more a case by case. So just a reminder there, but yeah.
Yeah, personally, that was the only thing that caught my attention, but overall, the plan looks really solid, so I don't really have any other feedback for you, personally.
I forgot to mention, but they are moving through the site plan review process right now, so that process is ongoing. I just forgot to mention that in my staff report, so.
Before before we get too far ahead, I'd like to open up to public comment. If there's any public members here, if they would like to comment on this project, please step forward. All right, seeing no one step forward. Is there any call-in comments? All right, no call-in comments. Is there any more discussion from the board members, or we still need a little bit of time to look it over? All right. Can I get a motion to approve the NFP site plan for the 1900 Belford Street project with the removal of the non-native species and conditional upon approval from the stormwater engineer?
So moved.
Support.
Support, all right. This one will need a roll call vote. Naomi, please call the roll.
Mercier?
Yes.
Martin?
Yes.
Bassett?
Yes.
Rowe?
Yes.
All right, motion passes. Moving on to G, unfinished business. NFP board work session. Can you provide some information on that? Nolan?
Yeah, so I don't have anything for today, unfortunately. I was trying to wrangle our staff person to come today, but it looks like July or August. If that falls through, though, I'm going to make sure for our next meeting in July that we do have something to work on as a board. It's just May and June were kind of heavy. Obviously, we weren't front-loaded with cases early in the year, and then sort of mid-year, we started getting a number of cases all at once. So hopefully come back in July. I have been working on updates to the NFP guide, so I'll probably bring a new draft of that for our next meeting. I know some of you have shared external resources that I can link to that provide some recommendations. For those who weren't at the previous meeting, I did get confirmation from our city attorney's office that if we link to external resources that have, you know, say like the list of arborist services from the Arborist Association, et cetera, I can link to those and share those. We can share those with people. It's not giving a certain preference to any one contractor or company. It's just, here's the list. You can take a look at it and contact folks, but at least we get people pointed in the right direction for those who aren't familiar with that type of process. And that should be really helpful, I think, especially for any smaller project or new developers, or maybe even like a residential project that just doesn't know, you know, where to begin. So, but other than that, I don't have much else.
Do we need to, that's one sort of service. Do we need to come up with one of those for each service?
I think it's been brought up a couple times.
Yeah.
What we could look at next is the options if native species aren't available, where people could maybe look for resources on natives and potentially non-invasive non-natives that, you know, could function well in our regional climate.
Yeah, that seems like the perennial question. Almost.
It is a perennial question.
Oh, jeez, look what I did there.
Yeah, and I think that's the other thing too, is that, there's always the option for applicants to bring forward their list of landscaping plans with potentially non-native species on there, and they can make a justification to the board, and then the board's, again, able to discuss and during the meeting approve non-invasive, non-native species. So the board has that flexibility always. And the applicant has the ability to come forward too. And then during the meeting, there's the option for dialogue, but if we had some resources ahead of time, it could also save time. So there isn't that guessing game. It also takes anxiety off of the applicant for, okay, I know I have some species that don't necessarily fit the bill, but I'm going to come forward with it anyway. And, that can be intimidating or induce some anxiety for the applicant, which I would like to avoid and have this be like it has. I mean, it has been more of a dialogue with the board and providing recommendations. But if there is a list that a board member knows about, or we could also review the ordinance itself, and I know it references like missing, right, and other resources on things to avoid, but not necessarily providing a place to look for alternative species. So, yeah.
Yeah, I guess the one, like, by example, the 3 species that we looked at today, in my knowledge, as far as I can tell, they're quote harmless. They're not known to be invasive in Michigan. But there's always a chance with any species that say maybe one of those is invasive in southern Indiana or something like that, and it's not on our radar. And I think it's up to us to vet the list and know more about those species, I think, too, for sure, which,
yep,
try to work harder on that in the future. But for those species, I would have to look them up and see if they're on lists in other states, basically.
Yeah, and the other aspect I've started thinking about a little bit more too is what effects insect species might have on certain landscaping plants. I know in the past we've had discussions on certain viburnums that are susceptible to an invasive beetle. Of course, we don't want to, it might be harmless as the plant itself, but if it helps proliferate an invasive species of beetle, that's not something that would be, have a positive effect on our native species, even if it only attacks that certain type of plant and not others. But yeah, it could jump to another species, or so there are things like that to consider, and I think that's where the board has that flexibility and the expertise to bring some of those concerns forward to an applicant who might only be looking at it from, can this species function well in this environment? Is it maybe low maintenance? We've also run into that question of how easily obtainable certain native species are, given our supply of nurseries in the state or in our region. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we could kind of put forth some kind of guide, like we all even have our own processes for kind of like determining these things that maybe we can be a bit more transparent about. Like today, for example, I was skimming through the list, and like the ones I wasn't so sure about, I cross-checked on like Michigan flora, and like I don't think everybody knows Michigan flora is like a resource out there, just like sharing the resources we typically use, and kind of having kind of all that stuff consolidated together could definitely be helpful in getting people further along, and then not feeling like they're as much alone trying to figure it all out by themselves, I guess.
Right, and we could even look at, it's a little more of a process, but, if amendments to the ordinance could include like a recommended table that gives recommended species, and then it provides some maybe external resources that if someone says like, hey, I'm not able to procure this type of species that's recommended, then when they come to the board and they have other options that they present, it could be, well, we looked at this option that was recommended, we weren't able to find it or procure it for X, Y, Z, or we're limited in budget, and these options are cheaper. Then there's a little more justification there too from their end on why they, but then they're still using resources that we're comfortable pointing to, and that at least gets them in the right direction. But it gives them a starting point and a jumping off point if they need to search for other options. Because I know if you Google a plant species, either using its Latin name or its common name, it's pretty much a maze of links and pictures and resources, and a lot of species look very much alike. And so if you're not a professional in that world, it could easily be, you could get confused with where you need to go and what you need to look for.
And you can get bad information too.
Yes, and we want to provide positive reinforcement with good information. So
Yeah, there's some stuff out there that can be a bit falsely labeled as native wildflowers or native planting stuff that maybe it's not necessarily native to Michigan, native to elsewhere, or it could have just sometimes outright non-native stuff to begin with. Yeah, helping to kind of parse through that stuff. I can't remember if I emailed it to you or if I just talked about emailing it to you, but the Wildflower Association of Michigan, they have like a pretty good comprehensive list of native plant nurseries in Michigan.
Yep, I did receive that, so
Okay.
that's something that is a thing. If you do find a resource, you can email it to me, and I'll make sure and try and incorporate that as into the guide, and I can do a little more asking too about if we do an amendment to the ordinance, if the board wants to do more research on some recommendations for plant species. What I'm imagining in my head is it's sort of a context-sensitive table. So you could have the species listed as well as potentially what situation they're good for. And so if a lot of times landscaping plans are for screening, or they're along the street, and so considerations there that some might not think about is like, well, there's road salt in the winter, there's potential damages being that close to the public right of way. So what type of species might work best there? A lot of times you'll just see arborvitae, just generally kind of robust, kind of can take a beating and punishment as a screening, a natural screening tool. So I think, that's kind of what I'm envisioning in my head that could potentially be very useful. Because the other lists we have in the ordinance, like the vegetative buffers, have some of that. The native species, not so much, but, native tree species is a little different than grasses, sedges, forbs, all this other, it's a different scale.
Yeah, I think when we kind of first developed that kind of recommended species stuff, we were trying to think of like stuff that was native, but also like fairly hardy, could do well in an urban environment, and was actually likely to succeed versus be a super picky plant that's kind of hard to establish. And I think now that we have some new perspectives on the board with like landscape architecture and like kind of the tree care, shrub care, that type of stuff, it could be worthwhile to kind of like review that stuff with some new perspectives and make some changes.
Right, and I think so far, past year or so, we've had projects where the board has done a really good job of applying the ordinance in sometimes creative ways. So I think of the 3301 Tech Circle Drive as an example. There was a tree very close to the existing building that was technically protected, and basically the guidance and help of the board help that applicant understand, like, yeah, we would rather you remove that tree so it's no longer a danger, and we can add to the site elsewhere, so to achieve the same purpose, which again, I think achieves the intent of NFP in being mindful in development and not just saying, well, that tree's there, so you can't do anything. You can't do what you want to do, but thinking about it differently, right, creatively. And sometimes there are trees or, if it's prairies or things like that that really are truly of special concern or, should be considered in the development process to be saved. And sometimes a site provides that flexibility with building placement, and there's other options first before, but I think the board has done a good job of navigating that. I won't say tightrope, let's say slack line. It's a little more wiggle room, but that's the whole point. So I think if we added a table like we've kind of been discussing to the ordinance, that's leaning less away from, you must do this, but these are recommendations that can get you started on the right path. And it helps so that you're not just kind of lost in the weeds, I guess, so to speak. Just kind of wandering through the maze of corn, trying to understand.
I just went through that, and I'm on the board, and my landscape architect still didn't know what to put in the plans after I reminded them multiple times. And that's not because they're stupid, it's because they are doing 12 of these at the same time every day. And for us to have success with implementation in the more commercial development projects, we're going to be dealing with people who just want to see a list of stuff that they're supposed to do, because that's how they operate. And I think the danger there is making it so prescriptive that everything is the fast food version of native plants. But we can allow flexibility for people who want to be more adventurous in their exploration of biodiversity to do what they want to do. But at the end of the day, on these large, like the Country Club project is another good example. If we just give them a list of 30 or 40 plants that are sort of safe, pre-approved, with a note at the bottom that says you can also use a variety of other things that may be harder to grow or may have issues, with pests or deer or whatever it might be. I think we'll have more success that way in getting things through the process efficiently and less pushback from people when we're trying to adopt this.
Right, and that's where that's where the flexibility is there. It's not like it's not like a table like that would be required, right? Obviously, the required part would be, it's already listed in the NFP with landscaping. There's the stipulation that right now the requirement is natives unless the board approves non-invasive, non-native species. But again, that's kind of case by case. The ordinance should, it is, we are enforcing standards, but most people are not trying to, go for variances or get out of adhering to the standards. But I think with landscaping, it's also, the scope is different than, say, like slopes or lots of woodland. The landscaping is usually not the afterthought, but again, it's for zoning purposes, it's often it's a requirement for frontages and screening, and it's a little different. But I think there's opportunity to, bolster the ordinance with information that can help the projects move through that, navigate that. I think that point's taken, that it, absent of that resource, it can be a little challenging to understand exactly what to substitute, because again, it's not quite like trees. I mean, there's a lot of species of trees, but there's a lot more species of shrubs and forbs and grasses and things that I think are harder to, it's harder to navigate that. Especially when I know locally we have nurseries that are under pressure from not just private development, but public projects and, you know, other things. So their capacity might be or is probably going to be limited for certain species at certain times. So, but that's a benefit, not to beat a dead horse, but that's kind of a benefit of the NFP board, is that there is that background expertise where we can, you know, keep working on these items and come out the other side with a well-rounded addition potentially to the ordinance and to the guide.
All right, staff reports and updates.
Nothing new to report. Just keep sharing that. I mean, obviously, we'll keep Director Martin as long as he wants to stick around. But technically, we do still have that an opening board member seat. So keep sharing that with your professional networks. And haven't received any new applications yet, but just remind everybody who might be listening that you don't have to be. We have our expertise areas covered, so you don't have to necessarily be a career biologist or, you know, a geoscientist or developer to participate on the board. So welcome those applications.
All right. Communications and announcements. Are there any communications or announcements from board members? I'm hearing none. Adjourned.